episode are we on?
I don't know, man.
Welcome to the Memory Core. I'm Dan. That's Adam.
This is like what, episode 6 or 7?
Something like that. I'm
Been
too
a while.
lazy to look it up right now.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know we uploaded some stuff on making hex spaces, but yeah.
Yep. I put up the follow-up video today, actually.
Cool. I mean, hopefully we'll get some hits. For those of you who aren't aware or just coming across this now, and basically the idea is using simple geometry to make a hex space. Because you think about it, you try and make a hex space, you try and make a hex, like a hexagon by hand using like a protractor. Because I mean, I don't remember being taught in school how to use a compass or a pair of dividers. This is all stuff I've learned recently through woodworking and things like that. You pull out a protractor and try and draw it out, and you can do that okay, but you'll be actually much more accurate using compass or dividers and a really sharp pencil. You're probably within a thousandth of an inch if you take your time and you do it well. So using that to make hex spaces for mechs. So yeah.
And I'm not good at taking my time.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Dan, I don't know if you want to kind of go into detail about sort of your idea. Mine was more like taking this concept and sort of making like a premium base for a miniature. I mean, for me, like I am totally on board with spending all the money to get hex spaces from Iron Wind. I mean, whether it's supporting the company, whether it is the weight of the pewter base so that it keeps the miniature standing upright. I think that's really huge. And also, like, hey, I mean, for people out there who use like a circular base, something like that, that's fine. I mean, you do you. But it is kind of annoying looking at that and being like, but I don't know necessarily which way exactly the mech is facing. Like, it seems like it'd be really easy to fluff things. Especially for mechs that are more dynamically posed if you've got a circular base. Like, it's not technically legal for the game. So yeah, I mean, like, supporting Iron Wind, over a plastic hex space because, it's lightweight. Your mech will probably tip over much more easily. But I just kind of had this idea of, like, what if you got, like, a nice piece of cherry or walnut or quarter sawn oak and, had a mech that was just on that, like no terrain basing, just like the wood and a painted mech. It's just sort of an idea I was bouncing around my head. But Dan, you had something else that you were planning.
Yeah. So the bases I had, I mean, obviously we've already mentioned this probably 1,000 times about where we've started getting into the game, and the boxes that we had growing up only had paper counters in them. So we pretty much took that idea, and what I wanted to do was, because the hard part with paper counters is you can't really determine, kind of like when you were talking about the round hex space, it's really hard to determine facing, and obviously they blow over pretty easily or fall down pretty easily. So yeah, just making a wooden hex space for them, leaving a slot in the front of the hex space for a movement die, since that was something that was added to the game. Well, I mean, it's always been something that was there, but now it's actually like an official part of the game. And then on the wood bases themselves, in each arc, or each side, I should say, there's a Roman numeral that corresponds with the facing after a fall table. So the idea was to make something like this for paper miniatures, or I'll call them miniatures because that's how they always felt for me. But like our paper miniatures, so you could determine facing and all of that. And the other thing is like, I'm a fan of Alpha Strike. Being able to use them in that setting and being able to do things like base-to-base contact and determining like what cover, because they get pretty detailed with cover in it too. Now, given they're flat, so that doesn't really help too much, but you could take like the top, like the clear part of a Chess X dice case and slap it over the thing, and you could determine it that way too, you know?
Well, right, because the Alpha Strike book, it does have sort of like templates that you can print out for roughly the size of a battle mech, right, for determining...
Yeah, which is basically the size of the hex base. So, like, even if you're determining, like, vertically it would be kind of hard, but, like, if... No, I think I got it messed up. Horizontally would be kind of hard. Like, if you're standing above it and you can't see the hex base, that's what you would use that template for. But vertically, like, if you're, like, half of your mech, like, from the top part of it to the bottom is, like, covered, you can determine that from the actual hex base.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because miniatures in BattleTech were never really about scale. You know, they were just more about being able to put them on a hex board and looking nice.
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of do want to push back against that a little bit, although you're not wrong. But this is my view on, like, the miniatures. I think this kind of goes back to some of the comments we've seen previously. And, you know, when the game first started producing miniatures, I mean, they were pretty rough and low detailed. But then around, I think, was it 87? I got a Thunderbolt unseen here that's been tipped over. There's
like
a... Yeah, like sort of 86, 87, 88. You've got these miniatures being produced for the first time, and it was a small group of artists, and they all seem pretty consistent in size. Like, I will say that, like, because I have, I think, pretty much every mech from the original 3025 TRO, and they all stack up pretty nicely next to each other from lights up to assaults. Like, they all look pretty good. And then with 3050, you've got, 2750 and then 3050, you've got, the Star League mechs and the Clan mechs and a couple of the new Inner Sphere ones, and you start to get a little bit wonkier. But I think with 3055 and 58, it starts to get a little more flexible, but I think things could really go out the window when Ral Partha and then Iron Wind had, like, the huge dip in quality control in the early 2000s. And there are a number of reasons for that, and whether or not, like, they're okay, there are still problems with it. So I think I will push back on the scale issue from at least the first round of miniatures, or, like, I guess maybe you would say, like, the second generation in the late 80s. I think they're okay.
Well, I wonder if it had to do with the transition from lead to pewter. Do you think? Or does it really make that much of a difference?
I don't necessarily think it makes that much of a difference. I mean, I think you'd have to pull out the, I don't know what the shrink coefficients are for, like, lead pewter versus lead-free pewter. That's one of the main reasons why miniatures shrink from the masters, is because the masters go in the mold, and then you're pouring hot metal into the molds, and then as they cool and solidify their shrinkage, they pull away from the mold. I think it's more like there was just sort of wonky quality control coming from Iron Wind that I think they've mostly fixed. But yeah, I mean, I think that'd be one of those things that'd be really worth doing, would be going through my collection and, like, posting comparison photos and seeing how all these miniatures line up next to each other. And, sort of like the Griffin and Shadowhawk, where the feet are splayed and maybe they go beyond the hex base. I think, I mean, they all work together pretty well.
Yeah, there's a lot of consistencies between them in the early sculpts.
Yeah,
it's
like
the first,
you're right. But, like, you're right. Like, once you
first
get past that, like, it gets really, like, here there be dragons. It's really weird.
The early clan sculpts had consistencies too.
Oh yeah, well yeah, they did, and because it was all done by, like, sort of the same artist. And when they did the 2000 resculpts, that was, I think, one of the first times Iron Wind was working with CAD for masters, and the original Thor/Summoner and Loki/Hellbringer sculpts stood maybe a little bit too tall because the legs were so large. And then they ended up shrinking the legs down, but kept the torso and arms the same size. But Chris Lewis, who did the artwork, did point out, like, look, this is accurate based on the orthos that was provided in the original TRO 3050. But when it came to the actual tabletop, it didn't look right. So they did adjust that.
The Summoner was supposed to be a really tall mech anyway.
It was, and the Summoner and the Hellbringer had the same leg design. So they just carried it over like no sweat, but it just ended up not working. So yeah, I think I have that first production run, the Hellbringer and Summoner. I haven't painted them. It's been like 20 fucking years, but I haven't painted them.
The struggle is real.
Yeah. Well, hey, man. I mean, like, you would think with COVID we'd all have time, but I've been busy at work, and it's not just people being stuck at home looking at their dog too long, thinking something's wrong with the dog. We got to take it into the vet, and like we had a lot of really sick patients. So I've been really busy, which is good. I mean, I shouldn't really complain about that because I know, hey, I mean, the bottom could fall out at any moment. It can definitely be a thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I've been staying pretty busy too. A lot of the protests going on, so banks were broken into, and stores, and I've been doing nothing but dealing with like vandalized ATMs I have to break into, and vandalized safes that have like handles missing, and all kinds of stuff, man. So needless to say, I've been very tired lately. But there's something therapeutic about making a bunch of wooden hex spaces opposed to painting like the 10 pewter miniatures and some of these plastics that I have that are probably going to sit on the shelf forever too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is nice having something like that you can look at and reference, and everyone's sort of on the same board about what's going on with what facing things are. It's nice too because they're less likely to tip over. And the little plastic, stand-ups that come with the miniatures. I mean, they're like, less than a stiff breeze. Like a gentle caress from.
Well, some of them that I have, they even break easily. Like they become brittle over time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I had to figure out something for it.
Yeah, well, that's one of those things I wonder what will happen with, maybe it doesn't really matter, with the plastic miniatures in the long run, right? Because who's still going to be playing the game in 30, 40 years? But, plastics do get brittle, heat messes with them. So, yeah, we'll have to see how that goes down. Yeah, I mean, hey, BattleTech, right? I mean, with COVID, it's sort of like, yeah, I get why. When there was an outbreak on a world in BattleTech, they would just quarantine the whole planet, or they just nuke the whole thing from orbit.
Yeah, Smoke Jaguar method.
You're like, well, didn't the Snow Ravens do that, or the Draconis Combine? They're just like, forget it, just with the warship.
Was that like a recent thing? Because I know they did it in, or not the Snow Ravens, but the Jaguars did it in the Invasion. But that was more of these people aren't listening to us. We should make an example out of them.
Oh yeah, I think it was in the Jihad. There was some, I think from one of the hidden worlds or something like that, some nasty outbreak of some genetically modified, virus, and it just, they didn't want to deal with it. And right now it's like...
we're not trying to say we should destroy the entire world.
Well, maybe Florida.
Well, yeah.
Just kidding. If there's anyone listening in Florida, and probably not, because we have 2 subscribers. If anyone's listening in Florida, I don't mean it. We're just talking.
Hey,
shit.
we're getting close to 100 subscribers, man.
Oh, cool. We might get to a point where we make 1 cent from YouTube.
Right.
Although we swear so much, we'd probably get demonetized. So
yeah, probably.
Whatever.
Well, that's why I'm making these hex spaces, Adam. I could figure out how to mass produce them, and we could slap a memory core logo on the bottom of them, and life will be good. We'll be rolling in all the cash.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's, anyway. Actually trying to talk about a little bit of BattleTech. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but the Kickstarter was showing there was some delays in production. I don't know if you got that
Yeah.
email, Dan. Um,
No,
is what
I
it is.
saw
I
it.
suppose. I mean, I can't really be surprised.
It's like typical though with Catalyst. I'm not even saying that in like a mean way. It's just you come to expect it. There's always some kind of delay when it comes to
Yeah.
battles. The longtime fans like us who read that email are just kind of like meh with the newcomers.
Right. But, I mean, for Catalyst too, a lot of it, they're freelancers. So it's not like they're doing the job, 8 hours a day. So it does kind of it gets done when it gets done. It may not be the most like healthy thing for the company because new products means more money, which means more funds to put back into products. But like, with the Kickstarter, a lot of it's already been paid for. So it's a different problem, but it seems to be an issue with the Chinese factory.
Yeah, it's not like they could, predict a pandemic was going to happen this year when they put the whole
Well, I mean, Kettle's even said, hey, this isn't, it's not really our fault. It's the Chinese company's fault. And I get it. Like, they want to stick with them because that company does do good work.
Their
quality of
plastics do
good.
look good.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it, I don't know. I mean, do you want the product or do you want a better quality product? And, even if it takes a little bit longer. And hey, I mean, I was waiting 10 years for a new Tool album. And when it came out, it still sucked. So whatever. I love Lateralis, but I'm sorry, guys. Like the latest one was just, not that great. Hey, how long do we wait for new Star Wars? And how did that turn out?
Oh yeah, tell me about it. It hit all the right nostalgia notes, but after you kind of took a step back, you realized, oh, you know what, this isn't really that good.
Yeah,
or hey, it's the same plot.
Yeah. Or how long do we wait, for, how bummed were we when we found out that season 8 of Game of Thrones was being split up? And then how did that turn out?
Ugh. I still want to watch that video that you sent my wife yesterday. She was listening to it.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember what YouTube channel that was. I think it was called The Dragon Demands. We're gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent here, guys. But the guy basically broke down. He got a hold of the original script for a couple of episodes of season 8 that basically really flipped things around and changed things. And the main crux of it was that sort of the Mad Queen moment from the ending of Game of Thrones, where Daenerys goes on a tear and just destroys King's Landing. King's Landing actually was not how it was originally scripted, and is not what the showrunners told. What's her name who plays Daenerys?
Emilia.
What am I blanking? Who was it?
Emilia Clarke.
Yeah, Emilia Clarke. That's not what she actually was told. And I think a lot of us who have been astute readers and followers of the show kind of figured that like it would be a very George R.R. Martin thing for Daenerys to show up and start kicking everyone's ass, but accidentally set off a cache of wildfire, which destroys King's Landing. And that seems like a very Martin thing to do, a very like bittersweet thing. Like, you got rid of the tyrant, but you've still lost the city, and the fallout from that, even though it was a mistake. And it's actually, Cersei's fault because she was the one, with all the dragon, fire, or all the wildfire caches. That seems like that would be the way it would happen. And this guy who does the analysis that really breaks it down. So yeah.
I thought a good foreshadowing for the end was the Starbucks cup on the table, honestly.
Yeah.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
No, I think the biggest gripe I had was with Jaime and Cersei. I honestly thought Jaime was going to kill her. That would have been made the most sense.
Well, and I think there are going to be significant differences from in the book, in the books, if they ever come out. But it does seem pretty clear that, Benioff and Weiss have no idea what they're doing, which is probably a reason why a lot of the projects they were sort of wanting to do and wanted to leave Game of Thrones as soon as they could for them, so they could get on to something new. I kind of get it. It's been 10 years and you want to do something new, but they've lost those. Like the Star Wars thing they were going to do. Disney was like, nope, you're not allowed anywhere near what our IPs are because you're terrible at your job. I think there are a lot of things that will be different. And like, if I said like if the books ever come out, because I don't know, man. I don't think Martin really cares anymore. And I kind of get it that he doesn't care because he's made so much more money doing everything else versus being, a starving writer and needing to put out material. Doesn't have to do that anymore.
The motivation's gone.
Yeah. And it's like, there are serious concerns of, did the world Martin make, is it too big to fit into just 2 more books? How many pages can you dedicate to all these characters that are perspective characters for different chapters? Like, can you hit all those beats? Can you dot those I's and cross those T's? How many do you have to kill to make space? And it's been like, 10 years and he hasn't done anything. And even if he was writing just a few chapters a year, he should be done by now. And I get it, like, he can make it, it's done when it's done. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's kind of hard not to be angry anymore or frustrated because it's like, if I knew he wasn't going to finish this, I wouldn't have read the books. I wouldn't have even started. I wouldn't have bothered.
Right. So what we're saying is we really hope that Ilklan doesn't take notes from season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of, it's sort of the same thing with Game of Thrones, right? The TV show. If we knew it was going to be that bad, if they were going to bungle the ending that badly, would any of us have bothered? All the theory videos on YouTube and discussions, would any of it have mattered? We wouldn't have done any of that because it didn't. It ended up not mattering at all. And so, when COVID hit, did anybody out there say, hey, I'm going to rewatch all of Game of Thrones? Nobody said that because it wasn't worth doing. And I don't think anybody out there was like, okay, well, hey, now that Game of Thrones is done, I'm going to finally see and check out what everyone's been talking about. No, nobody did because they're like, this is terrible. So yeah, with Ilklan, it's like, come on, Catalyst. It's time. You got to stick this landing. So yeah, that was a bit of a long aside there, guys.
The Jade Falcons get the Terra, and they're the first clan there, and they just decide to take it easy and get into gardening.
Oh, so,
man.
Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I just kind of had to get that off my chest. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm sure there are those of you out there who, are on board with what I've said. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily BattleTech, but maybe a little bit,
Well, I mean, that's what happens if you don't want to wait. So it's like getting back on the Kickstarter. If we rush them, we're going to get season 8. It's like
if we rush the movie season, but it's sort of like, okay, like talking about like back to Tool and Fear Inoculum. I mean, yeah, they were talking like, oh, we've had these ideas for years now. We could have done this album, 3 years after 10,000 Days. It's like, okay, well, why didn't you? Because it was still not that great of a product. And if you guys have listened to the whole album, I mean, there's a bunch of filler tracks that don't do anything. It's a lot of ideas on repeat for songs that sort of stretch them out and balloon them to kind of go nowhere. So in the end, it's like maybe 25, 30 minutes of actual listenable material that have been like what, the movie 300? If the movie wasn't in slow motion, you'd have like 15 minutes of movie.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. So sorry about that, guys. That's just me kind of bitching about, waiting on stuff and the slowness of products and releases, and there's just kind of for putting off the fact that we were going to do a part 3 of the clans and sort of the why Alexander Kerensky is a not great person, but still haven't spent the time reading the books necessary to put out that episode.
Yeah, it's just been rough to find time. I went on vacation for a week, and I swear I probably slept a decent chunk of that just because of how tired I've been.
Oh yeah. I'm chime in, audience, in the comments and let us know like what your experiences have been lately. I think it's been like 2 months since we've done an episode, and work's been hard. Yesterday at work for the morning wasn't even that busy, but I think I vegged out all of yesterday and a good chunk of today, just recovering from the rest of the week. And I'm looking at my Monday surgery schedule, and it's going to be just about the same. So yeah, I mean, again, for those of you who have not been able to work, I mean, this is by no means a slight against you guys. I mean, if you are service industry workers and you're in a state that hasn't reopened yet, or you're in a state that has reopened and you're fearful of getting COVID, or if you're in another country and fearful of getting COVID, what's it like been on, what has it been like on your end? So good times. That's quite a downer. But I mean, not to leave it on that note.
Yeah. What was your idea you had for this outside of our woodworking project?
Yeah. So Dan and I both live in older houses, and I was re-glazing windows. For those of you guys who are not in the know, and by no means is this knowledge that I just intrinsically knew. This was knowledge I had to come across because I made the decision to not only buy an older home, but to buy an older home with its original windows, because that was a really nice feature. And so, my house is like just under 2,000 square feet. And in the U.S., for the house that was built at the time when that was a pretty big home. But, now you can buy newer construction homes for, that are like 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet, McMansions that are much bigger. But, my house has, more than 40 windows. And so, doing that restoration project is a lot of work. When I was reglazing windows, which is when you've got your wooden frame window, your sash, and you take your sash and you have the glass sitting in the wooden sash in a ribette with glazing points to steady it, and then you're putting in glazing putty to seal it. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is probably what, Battletech would be like. Up into the 80s and 90s, a lot of, windows were still wooden windows, and they were held in place with glazing putty. And, glazing putty would be made with calcium carbonate, which is basically chalk, and linseed oil to make the putty. And you pop that in, you wait, 2, 3, maybe even more weeks to wait for it to skin over, and then you paint it. If you get a new window, or new windows, it's probably double or triple glazed. It's got some sort of inert noble gas like argon in between the window panes, and it has an advanced adhesive and sealant to prevent the argon from leaking out. That's great if you've got advanced construction materials and chemistry, and you can synthesize these adhesives, and you can make this glass, and you can get access to the argon gas. But eventually, those adhesives do fail, and the argon gas leaks out, and then you've got condensation in between the panes, and then you don't really have that insulating barrier. And what you've got is actually probably worse than a well-glazed window and a storm window. And it made me think, what happens in the succession wars if you're on a rough and tumble planet, or not one of those core worlds with advanced access to construction. You're probably seeing things very similar to a lifestyle very similar to like the 1950s and maybe even the 1800s, with advanced technology on the side. So like maybe you've got a fancy coffee maker, but you've got wooden windows that you have to reglaze every 15 years and paint over. And I was just like, that's a really interesting dichotomy. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, if that makes sense to you guys out there, that makes sense to you, Dan.
Well, that was the old aesthetic that BattleTech used to give, future of the 80s, but it was like a deteriorated 80s.
Yeah.
It's like how, I don't know, like what, you get into thinking, like, what kind of storage media did they use? What kind of computers did they use? If technology really deteriorated that much. I mean, I'm sure, like, the knowledge to produce such things, I mean, it was there, but if the materials aren't available, or, it's that beat up where you're basically like Mad Max scrounging for parts. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, your best friend would probably be someone who's a machinist, who has that equipment that can, make things very cleanly, and then use those things to make tools. I don't know if we would be seeing, I guess the question is, like, do you see a world with like really fancy equipment? Like, do you see table saws, or do you see, things made by hand again? Do you see, wooden planes and because making a wooden hand plane is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
You can use different methods, but like the traditional wooden hand planes, or if you were a pattern maker for, using beech to make a wooden pattern, to then make a master of, to then make molds of for metal, that takes a lot of skill. Because if you think about it, if you're in the future, are you going to be able to use your 3D printer? Does that go away because you can't get the resins? Because you can't necessarily get the software and the equipment to use a 3D printer? Sort of things. And then you think about it too is, okay, say you're a planet that makes windows, like window sashes with advanced stuff. Okay, like who's going to want to ship that? Because that, are there better things to ship on your drop ship than Windows? So a lot of things are probably going to be made on planet.
You think they're going to reglaze the windows on that Union eventually?
Well, hopefully that Union's going to be using like transparent aluminum windows, like Star Trek. Kind of crossed my mind. Like, I mean, those of you who, like, if you live in an older style home, these are things you're probably going to have to be good at, things you're probably going to have to see. And I, for a while there, I thought, like, oh, man, do you see a return of lead paint for a brief moment? And then people remember, oh, right, that's what lead paint does. But maybe you would see a return of oil-based pigments and just like linseed oil. Because all you need to do to make linseed oil is flaxseed, and you squeeze it out, and then there you have it. It's almost more of a homesteading kind of thing.
Well, like when I when I think of BattleTech, when I read a lot of the fluff or even through the novels, I always thought of it as, I mean, each planet might have different technology levels to it, but most of them, to me, kind of had a like Wild West kind of feel to it, which, you're getting into talk about Windows. I mean, with the way like some planets could be, who knows if they even had windows on some buildings? Because I mean, you could have I mean, think of like all the like border periphery planets, that have like pirates everywhere. You think people are really going to have time to sit there and do things like reglaze windows and upkeep buildings? Um, I mean, I always kind of like when they say Mad Max, I always think of like a Wild West kind of aesthetic for the game, or
Yeah.
something like feudal. Like back then, like Dark Ages, you'd have like your blacksmith in town and stuff not like a literal blacksmith, but I think you know what I'm getting at. There's like
Yeah.
certain trades that are going to be valuable for that planet.
Yeah, yeah. I think those who have skills like that, it's probably very valuable, and they would be really kind of highly sought after. Uh, so yeah, it's one of the, like I was thinking about it too. Is you look at like history, right, and you look at say you wanted to pick up a book that maybe cataloged, arms and armor from sort of the Roman era. Probably not too hard because Rome gets a lot of attention. But if you want to go earlier than that, there's a big gap between classical Greece and Alexander the Great, and then it jumps all the way to Rome. And there's plenty of evidence, plenty of stuff that's been dug up archaeologically that you can use to catalog things. But you're not going to find a book that really collates it. So then you think, okay, I'm in university. I've got access to, JSTOR or the other libraries. I can look up all this stuff, all these articles, no sweat, right? So you start pulling them up and you start looking up things on archaeological finds, and the vast majority of it are going to be on it's going to be fucking pots, man. It's going to be pot shards and like what they found in this amphora, and there's not a lot in terms of military things. It's going to be, we found this pot sherd and it had this writing on it, and it can be kind of a downer if you want to do stuff with like the military. But now, of course, now we're in BattleTech, right, where everything's so focused on fighting and battle mechs. But here you sort of think, okay, what would it actually look like to actually live in that world? It's just not something that I think is really discussed too often. And I just sort of think about it.
It's a lot of fans have different interpretations because the new miniatures, I mean, getting back on like the new stuff, it's almost like they want to change that aesthetic.
Yeah.
They want to go for every planet. It's just another way to, kind of like we were talking about the new aesthetic for the miniatures, just everything becomes lumped together. It all becomes the same, and it's like we're moving from some planets that are lucky to have working fax machines to, okay, now everybody has like advanced hologram like computers and internet is everywhere now. Like that kind of stuff is readily available.
Oh yeah, like Star Trek Picard broke my heart because how bad it was, and that's a whole other like 3-hour rant if we want to get into that. But it's just sort of like you saw like these really elegant lines and these displays in the Next Generation, and of course there was some limitations with 90s production, but then you sort of contrast that with these like really clunky looking ships, and yet everyone has these holographic displays because it sort of looks cool. It's sort of futuristic, these holographic displays. Oh my God, can you imagine the eye strain? Like,
Yeah.
I'm 35, guys. I cannot imagine looking at a holographic display in front of me for hours on end. Like, that would be miserable.
Everyone's doing Tony Stark jazz hands,
Yeah. Oh, God. Awful. Awful.
Fucking
Awful.
hologram. Yeah, I think we had the discussion too, even when it comes down to, like, then we have the discussion about coolant vests, like how stupid people thought it was, like the Sea Mech Warriors, like basically about naked in their cockpits, but like people they're like, oh yeah, it's better to wear something, which is true. Like it's better to wear something because it'll actually like keep you cooler, opposed to like being down in your boxers. But it's like you guys couldn't think of something like Under Armour. You had to go with like these real generic looking fatigues and just like apply it to everybody, so it looks like it's Call of Duty and mechs or something.
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't you just keep like a happy medium with the old way? But then again, it comes down to it. You think some planets are going to be able to make Under Armour?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely, what is the meat and potatoes of BattleTech? And that's why I think it'd be cool to do a whole episode sort of looking at the old examples of artwork and then looking at, similar examples that would have inspired those artists, whether it was, science fiction covers from the 70s and 80s, for like books and illustrations, and bringing that stuff in. But yeah, I mean, okay, so like not every character has to have a mullet. Okay, we can get rid of the mullets, but the meat and potatoes of the world, I think, is really important. And they were thinking of like, okay, what is it? What do you buy when you want a chair? I mean, do you get some plastic extruded thing? Like, one, I mean, you have to be able to make the plastic, and maybe you don't live on a planet that can make the plastic, but making iron to make tools is probably something that can be done because you can machine the metal very easily, and then using that to make something out of wood. So like maybe you see a return of, wood siding, a lot of wooden chairs. You're not going to see a lot of pressboard and veneered stuff like an IKEA kind of things. Like you're going to see
future IKEA.
Yeah,
that's
IKEA.
An interesting thought.
Yeah, there's a really cool. Yeah, there's a really cool book called How to Make a Chair from a Tree, and it walks you through how to get a tree, how to split the wood, how to bend it, how to shape it, how to cut the joints. Like I imagine you're probably going to see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a. I don't know. I almost feel like it's kind of dangerous what they're doing when they go back and like retcon things. And I mean, I understand it. There's some things that actually do need some updating, but they're kind of treading between the line of, do we want this to be different, or do we want this to be modernized to the point where it's no different than any other war game we have out there? Which is probably a good reason why the rules have stayed the way they were for so long.
Yeah,
when you look at the rules in Battle Droids or First Edition, all the way to where we're at now, not really anything has changed.
The changes are relatively minimal. Yeah.
Sorry. I was starting to talk over you. I was going to say, like, the only thing that really changed was everything post-clan invasion, which was part of the tension before, the clans arrived. Like, they were just starting to get themselves, well, not really necessarily out of the hole with the Helm memory core, but, certain technologies were starting to come back, and that's why there was so much tension when the clans came right away, because it was just all the planets that they took over had like nothing. A majority of them, like Porthos, there was one warrior that actually like there were no defenders on that planet, and there was one warrior that actually came out of retirement to challenge. I think it was the Ghost Bear Sakon, might have been Khan or Sak. I don't know, one of them from Alpha Galaxy, and that's how they actually defended the planet. It wasn't this big battle like every BattleTech book tries to paint. At least the newer ones.
Yeah, going through, because I know a lot of, there's like a breakdown of conflicts by world, and it was maybe one of those things where it's like, a lot of original, BattleTech stuff was maybe a little bit too detailed for its own good. But, there is a breakdown in the Jade Falcon source book, the Clan Wolf source book, and then the Invading Clans source book for the other clans. Breakdown almost like by planet in terms of what things look like. But then again, a lot of the guys who wrote those books were big fans of the Civil War and other military matters, and so that's what their frame of reference was, and they ran with it.
It's just interesting to think, like, one guy coming out of retirement on a planet, like, what was going on? Like, why would it was a Draconis Combine planet, but it's like, what was actually going on Porthos that like nobody was there? And it makes you think, like, going back to your comments about technology and having the re-glazed windows and, making your own chairs and things like you would think, like, on that planet, if they only have one person who was ever in that military, or at least, like, the last person from the military who retired on that planet, like, what were their means of production? How did they handle food on that planet? How was housing on that planet? How was the economy, when it comes down to just like one person defending it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a lot of, there's probably a couple of people who are very skilled at doing things. And yeah, I mean, you're probably seeing blacksmithing and, joiners and I mean, I don't know if you'd see timber framers. I mean, if you're going to build a house, like, what would it look like? Would it be timber framed, or would it be, how a lot of houses are built today, with joists and hangers and other fasteners? I think you probably would see a return to a lot more, stable stuff that you can rely on for a very long time. Like for me, at the clinic, my dad built the veterinary clinic in '94. And I'm at this point where I'm seeing a lot of the cabinets having, failures where sort of the hardware is. You have the drawer sliders, and then you have the cabinet face, and the aluminum that, holds the face onto the sliders is breaking. You think, okay, is there a better way to do this? That's not going to be the case. And I imagine that over time, with BattleTech, Succession Wars hit, and you've got 250 years of just things going down the tubes, you're probably seeing, the development of methods and materials that are going to be, not pocket screws when you're making a box or a drawer. You're going to be seeing probably dovetails. You might see a return to hide glue. Because again, man colonized these planets, and so you're probably seeing, if there's not native versions of trees, you're probably seeing imported trees like pines and oaks and cherry and stuff like that. Just because, I think one of the reasons why the Lao family was so successful at the beginning of the Capella Confederation was because I think the planet they were on had a bunch of either imported or domestic livestock that they could sell, because I think the planet was mostly grasses. So they brought in what they needed to do to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, even if, worst case scenario, the planet falls off the grid somehow, they have to at least be sustainable on their own too. So you might see a lot of those old methods come back.
Yeah, because, if you guys want to glue something together, I mean, you have to basically chemically come up with essentially, PVA glue or epoxy or like a polyurethane glue. But if it's not going to be exposed to the elements outside, you could probably use hide glue. Because all you need to do with hide glue is just basically put a bunch of animal skins in a crock pot for a couple hours and then strain it out. And then the collagen that's in the water is your hide glue. You just let it dry, and you crush it, and you've got granules. And then you're set. So there you go. Now you've got glue. And you didn't need a chemistry set to make it. You just needed a pot and some water and some animal skins. So you do wonder, okay, are you going to see a return of that kind of stuff?
I don't know, some planets you might be able to make flatbread a lot better than normal bread, because it's the atmosphere is different, than like what we know on Terra.
Yeah.
You might have different, cooking methods. Man, you could really get into it when you start thinking of little details like that.
Right. It's just so if you're like role playing, I think those are things that you can kind of consider and bring in. Or if you're storytelling, what does the universe look like? What does it look like on a ground level? And again, like you don't really see that in stories because it doesn't really matter. I mean, we read BattleTech because of, the mech combat. You don't,
You're not really thinking of everything else, but then you got weirdos like us that actually sit down and be like, hey, you know what? That's actually interesting to think about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because if you wanted to make, again, and I mean, to kind of come back to Windows, and if you wanted to make, a good Windows sash, I mean, like, there are actually factories that showed how they do it, and I think there was one guy, he was on PBS. What's his name? Why am I blanking on everything today? But he basically goes to an old Windows sash factory and shows how they do it, and you can make these factories. They basically power them with windmills or a water mill, and then these leather bands that run on these drive shafts that basically power all these tools. And you've got cutters that can basically be made from tool steel, and you can do all that by hand to make that cutter, and then you just run it through everything, and then you're set. You've got your window. It'll cut your profile, cut your co for your mating piece, and then you're good. And then you just got to glaze it and paint it, and then you're set, and you've got a window. You don't need really fancy tooling in factories to make aluminum or vinyl, and then these advanced adhesives and a source of argon gas, to fill it, to insulate it. It's just a different method of doing things that I think we're not really familiar with because we don't have to do that anymore. But what happens when you do?
I should probably link that. You sent me a video before about that family, was it in Ireland, that makes scissors? That'd be a pretty good example for this too.
Oh, yeah. I think I did send it to you. Yeah.
Like the whole process, like they're expensive too, but it's just because of the amount of labor they put into it. Because they're using high quality metal, they're using like heat methods to like shape it and everything. They're using, what is it, like I don't think it was like sandpaper, but something grit. Maybe it was, to like sharpen it like perfectly to the point like you can, I don't know if they did it in there, but like you could probably hear it even by ear, like to know if you actually had it like cut right. Like that's the amount of skill that the family had when it came to making these things. Something to where like something as simple as like sound, they would know that they actually did it right when they put it all together. But thinking about, I should probably link to that video. I should dig it up and find it again. But
I'll see if I can find the other stuff I mentioned. Yeah, because I do remember sending that your way. Just like how was it done? I mean, especially in the industrial era. You could a lot of that stuff, a lot of really, really good tools that have lasted, the centuries. They're made because they're made by people, even in a factory setting, who are really good at what they did. I have a number 8 Stanley joiner plane that, I mean, I don't know if I don't think there's a serial number on there, but it's probably over 100 years old. And all I needed was a replacement blade for it, and it works great.
Yeah, I don't have any fancy tools. I mean, I got an old key machine in my garage. A really old key machine that Diebold made. One of their, I don't think it's one of their originals, but one of their first like motorized ones that's still around. I mean, shoot, you think some of these old planets have old Diebold looking vault doors with the engraving on them and the glass with all of the where it's like church glass, inside of it. Old school brass combination locks. And
I mean, if you were probably on like one of the major planets, you could probably have something like that, like like New Avalon or
Hey, time locks will
I,
make a comeback if he can't have a security system.
you got to think, okay, what's going to be? I think one of the limitations is what can be exported and what can be made on planet. You know, do you spend the time and money to ship a fancy vault, or do you spend the time and money to send over the equipment that can make, 100 vaults, that kind of thing?
Hmm. Yep, some people are, God, I wonder how they moved them back then. It's like horses and, because, I mean, a lot of the buildings that these vaults are in, man, like they put the vault in first and they built the building around it. I mean, you can, I think they did it in downtown Joliet. It was that First Midwest Bank when they demolished that building. The last thing they took out was that vault, man. They had to demolish everything around it, and then they pulled the vault out of it in the end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure it was a lot of work to get that vault out too.
That thing was beautiful too. I think it was a Herring Hall Marvin from like the 1900s.
And
It had a lot of the original parts on it too, old
do you know
glass
what?
and everything.
Do you know what the city did with it? Did they just like pitch it and like scrap it?
I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. But I know a lot of usually what happens is like a bank will buy the building, but they don't actually own it. Like a landlord actually owns the building, and they, depending on the size of the door, I'll have service calls. Like I just had one for a place way up north. It was a hobby store. I wish I could remember off the top of my head. My memory's not doing as well like yours today. But I had to do work for them. He just wanted to use the vault door again, and he still has all the old safe deposit boxes and everything in it. And he got that. It was like an old Western style building. Like you could feel like when you walk on the floors, like that old raggedy like Western like building feel. I mean, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And all I had to really do was recombo it, but like the condition was still fine. And then like you go in the basement and there's like another vault door down there because it's like a vault on top of a vault, But what I was getting to was in that basement, when the guy got the building from the owner of the building at the time, like he purchased it from him. The guy, I don't know how he did it, but he actually took the door off and took it with him, the one in the basement. And he has no idea how he did it either.
Jeez.
I mean, he had it's possible, but I mean, a lot of these things end up in like machine shop, like scrap yards, where you can, and I kid you not, you could go on eBay and you could look up Diebold vault door, and you can even find some on eBay for like up to between like 5 to like 20 grand. Like you could move them.
Yeah. Oh.
There's sometimes I get curious. Like, I mean, I've bought a pallet of safes from someone before, and they're like 1.5 by 1.5 feet, and I've refurbished them and sold them, and I've carried them by hand and threw them in the back of my truck. You're usually just like anchored to the ground, but like those big vault doors, man, where there's a will, there's a way. You can move them.
Yeah, I just imagine like, hopefully you don't have to go up or down any stairs.
No. Well, that guy had to. That's why I'm like, I don't know how he did it. I have no idea. But he freaking took it with him.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like when it comes to like vaults, right? I imagine, it depends on what resources are on the planet too. What kind of steel do you have access to, and then what kind of compromises do you have to make? And that, like the katana, for example, the katana really is, it's a series of compromises because of what poor quality iron Japan had access to, and then how they kind of worked around that. I imagine, depending on where you're at, if there's not a lot of iron in the crust of the planet, you're probably relying on other materials to do things.
Back to
At
the
that point,
Bronze Age.
you have to import a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's just sort of, again, like stuff you don't think about that you don't really have to think about. But I suppose if you were making an RPG environment, these are things that you would be thinking about. Like, okay, what does the world look like that I'm living in? And I suppose it's one of those things. If you were to ever live in a world in which there might be a BattleTech movie, what does that look like? How do you capture that feel? Because I don't think it necessarily would be. I think that some plants would be definitely Mad Max. There's a great PDF only product, and I can't remember who commented on it, but it was basically, I think it was on the Tortuga Dominions, and it's okay, one of the pirate powers, and you think basically what the guy said, and I think was it Weirdo over on the boards, but you go and expecting like Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, yo ho, a pirate's life for me. And you end up reading the supplement, you're like, oh my God, this whole thing was like Witness Me, Mad Max Fury Road, cover to cover. You don't really expect that, but it's there.
All I want to do now is see the Doof Warrior on the, like, top of a battle mech just blasting his damn guitar. I can see Ron the Snord recruiting him for that.
Yeah. This poor dude bobbing up and down underneath the chin of the Highlander mech, speakers blaring it out. Actually, you know what? I bet a Goliath would be a good choice for a mech like that.
Yeah,
you replace the LRMs with speakers.
All the clan elementals are like, witness me.
Yeah.
That's
It'd
what
be interesting. So, planets that are like late 19th century, early 20th century lifestyles, juxtaposed with, advanced battle mechs and other advanced materials. And then you've got that next to planets that are very Mad Max-ish, roving bands of warriors. You've got, because I know, I think it was in one of the Avanti Angels books where they go to Astrokazi. I think one of the few times we actually were on the planet Astrokazi. You've got basically like Bedouin tribes and nomadic tribes, working its way through the canyons of the planet. And you see that sort of lifestyle. And then you see maybe the more advanced, futuristic science fiction lifestyle that you would see on, a major, wealthy planet.
New Avalon,
yeah.
era.
So yeah, I think we kind of talked there for quite a bit, over an hour now on things like that. So just kind of wanted to get that off my chest. What would life be like? And I think on a good chunk of planets, you'd probably see something, very similar to, 20th century, early 20th century life. Where, hey, if you want to take care of your house, you have to know how to glaze a window and paint a window, and you have to know how to nail boards together, and maybe there's a dude down the street who's, putting together, stick chairs and splitting wood to make chairs versus, just going to an IKEA and getting something.
I don't like IKEA.
Yeah.
I never really did.
Yeah.
I don't think you can get an Oscout to navigate through IKEA.
No, you get lost. Well, they have those arrows everywhere so that you don't get lost, but, you still. Yeah, that's enough rambling on my end. I don't know, was there anything else you wanted to say, Dan?
No, interesting topic. You actually caught me off guard with that one. And it kind of goes with, the silly little hex bases I've been making, because, we're making all of them. Or I'm making all of them out of wood, man.
Yeah.
Just take my sweet time with it. I've even gotten to the point where I'm making little dice now to go on it. Everything wood and paper.
Yeah, I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can track down, those videos, sort of those relevant videos that show kind of that stuff. What they would do and how they would do it.
You could do like a pinned comment, you know, so people could check them out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to put this up, Dan, I'll start looking some stuff up, and I'll get a comment that you can pin for me. We can kind of go from there.
So yeah, that was episode 6, 7, one of them.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Yeah, had to break the silence there and get something out for you guys to listen to. And who knows? Maybe the next one will be a little bit more planned out and thought of. But the idea struck me, and we hadn't had a chance to do anything. And something for you guys to think about out there. Whoop, sorry, my cat is knocking things over.
I got my door closed. My cat can't come on me.
Yeah, something for you guys to think about. When you look around and you consider what things were like. There's a really cool book by Lost Art Press. Let me see if I can find it quickly so I can get you guys a title. But basically, I think it was Woodworking in Estonia, and this book is a reprint, or I think a translation of the original, and it's the examples they use. They are not. This is not from hundreds of years ago. Here it is. Woodworking in Estonia. Roy Underhill. He's the other guy. He's the guy I was talking about with the window factory. And Roy Underhill had a show on PBS that was pretty brilliant. But basically, this Woodworking in Estonia, it was put together, I think, in the middle of the 20th century. That sort of broke down how things were done in Estonia by craftsmen. And it uses and describes, various tools and how they did it, how they would hold the work in place, what their workbenches looked like. And oddly enough, their workbenches actually match very closely examples of ancient Roman workbenches that we see from, artwork. So yeah, just kind of cool stuff. Like I imagine things would look that way. And this stuff is not that long ago. Us using all the power tools that we use now, like that is really, really recent stuff. So yeah, I mean, people making pots, people making dishes, making utensils, making everyday objects that you use. How would it be done? What would it look like when you don't have access to modern factories? And you don't have access to populations to support those factories.
That's why we have a cattle master.
Yeah. I hope you're gonna. I hope when you edit this, you're gonna put up that image of the cattle master.
Yeah, I'll put up the cattle master. I'll make a nice collage of all of some of the industrial mechs, the silly looking ones.
Yeah, all the quad mechs and everything.
By the way, this is episode 7.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah, welcome to episode 7. We're leaving now.
Yeah. Well, hey, you guys take care. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear your mask.
Don't be like Florida.
Yeah, don't be like Florida.
All right,
cool.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yeah. Signing out, guys. Bye.
Bye.